On today's episode of Driven Too Far, we're talking about how to integrate electric trucks into your fleet operations.
Hello, I'm Andrew Winkler, and this is Driven Too Far, the truth about trucking, a podcast that helps over-the-road truck drivers balance career and family.
Hey, on this episode of Driven Too Far, we're joined by Brad Bayne with 4Gen Logistics. And Brad and his team have recently dove in headfirst to the truck electrification game. So welcome to the show, Brad.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So Brad and I met just a few weeks back in Scottsdale, Arizona. We were both invited to the Heavy Duty Trucking Fleet Innovators, which was a fun experience. Got to meet a lot of really cool people, and Brad was on the stage, and he was telling their story or sharing their story about the journey to electrification. So, I thought what was neat about it, Brad, was your company was all in, man. They wanted to be one of the first, and they made a commitment to do it. So you guys dove into that. Could you tell us a little bit about, what made that decision and how did that all go and how's it working out?
We operate, 4Gen operates in California. So as many of you may know, that's a whole different beast when it comes to regulation and what California's zero emissions initiatives are pushing us towards. So we deal with an organization out there called CARB, California Air Resources Board, and they have some pretty strict timeline and mandates coming on board. We are a drayage company in and out of the ports of LA and Long Beach, and the effects there are even faster than maybe the rest of the state of California. As of January 1, 2024, you can no longer register anything but zero emission vehicles to enter the port of LA and Long Beach. So we're a few months away from that taking effect. So we saw the writing on the wall about 3 years ago, even before I joined the company, to come on and really push forward to a zero initiative effort, at least in the state of California. So that journey's been a long one. We're still right in the middle of it, unfortunately, after 3 years. But with the state kind of driving those mandates, our owner, David Duncan, is very much like to be on the cutting edge of new technology. So he's like, hey, let's take this as an opportunity for us to get out in the forefront of this new push for zero emissions. And what does that need to look like? So they started the process about 3 years ago. I'm 2 years into leading the initiative, along with a counterpart that I have there in Los Angeles. And things are going along, I guess, as well as things can go along in the EV world right now. We're definitely finding some struggles. But it was really that initiative and our owners' desire to be on that cutting edge that kind of put us out there. And I can say this to you guys, we want to be the first zero emission fleet, complete zero emission fleet by the end of 2025 is our goal. So we'll be at roughly 70 power units and be completely zero emission by the end of 2025 is what we're pushing for.
Yeah, California's been obviously super aggressive, kind of leading the pack with the big electrification or zero emission push and stuff. So I guess 3 years. So how long ago did you order electric trucks, and did the OEMs even have them out 3 years ago? I'm not even sure how long they've been out on the market and available.
Yes, certain ones did. We started our EV initiative with BYD as the OEM. They had some trucks out and available, and they actually allowed us they kind of gave us 2 of their first generation trucks just to try them. So that's kind of how this all got started for us 3 years ago. Ultimately, the first generation kind of were a little underpowered and didn't really work for what we needed. But then we moved into their generation 2 truck shortly after that. And for about 2.5 years, we've been running 3 BYDs, strictly in the ports of Long Beach and LA, in and out of the ports to our local yards. Okay. And they've been workhorses for us.
And they've performed well, it sounds like, huh?
Yeah, they have, with very few, maintenance issues. And of course, you don't have a lot of the other internal combustion maintenance things to deal with the electric. So it's been going pretty well for us.
Yeah. No sensors like we got on the diesels, right? And all those headaches those create for sure. So was 3 years long enough, or was the state, they're really pushing it, and if you guys are almost there, how are the other companies out there in a similar position? Are they going to make it by 2024, or is there going to be issues?
No, I think we're definitely up against some issues. Right now we're dealing with some issues across the board, from OEM delays to charging infrastructure delays. I've been asked to speak on a lot of different conferences and webinars, and the one thing I preach right now, if you're looking to get into electric vehicles, you should have probably started a while ago, but you need to start today, because the process is very time consuming. Once again, we're 3 years into it. We had hoped to be live with 60 trucks and 2 sets of charging infrastructure by the end or the beginning of this year. And now we're going to push out into 2024, and just based upon some delays we're dealing with, we're not exactly sure when it's going to end up, but we hope by early summer 2024 we have 60 plus electric vehicles in action in the state of California.
So when you say drayage and you're moving containers out of the ports over to your yard, is that the extent of what the electric vehicle is doing, or is the vehicle actually, are you taking it further than that and making any deliveries?
Yeah, we kind of have 2 sets. We've partnered with a couple different OEMs, Kenworth and Volvo. Our Kenworth trucks are what we consider a 4 battery unit with a little less range.
Okay.
So we're using those trucks strictly in our port application, where we're just in and out as many times as we can throughout a shift. We're a 2-shift operation, and they stay right there local in our Long Beach yards. So we average about 40 to 50 miles a shift on those trucks because we're so close to the ports. And then with the Volvos, we selected them because they have a 6 battery pack with a range of more in the neighborhood of 175 to 225 miles, depending on conditions. And those are the trucks that we're going to use at our Inland Empire Depot in Rialto, California, that will do all our customer deliveries. Our shifts and duty cycles are anywhere from 150 to 200 miles a day in those delivery patterns that we have with our local customers. So we think the VNRs will fit our bill really well out there for those type of deliveries.
When you bring up electrification and we're talking in the industry, whether we're at a conference or whatever, I think the infrastructure is always the thing that pops up. Most of us feel like the infrastructure isn't there, certainly for long haul applications like I do. But talk a little bit about the infrastructure and what has that journey been like? You need so much power to charge these things. How do you get the power to your terminal? Were you successful doing that, and what kind of obstacles have you run into?
Yeah, I mean, the OEM delays have been frustrating, but the infrastructure side's been a whole nother beast. When you think about our infrastructure, just to talk a little bit about that, is our phase 1 in Long Beach at our yard there is going to have 30 350 kilowatt chargers, high speed. Our Rialto yard phase 1 is 14 of those same chargers. So when you look at our power demand just for our phase 1, it's 6 or 7 megawatts of power, which will provide enough power for about 30,000 homes. So we have a very large demand of power that we need. We got lucky that both of our locations right outside the property the power was there on the pole. Many companies are finding that where they'd like to put their location just doesn't have the power they need, and that adds a whole nother delay just for the utility companies to get power to the property. We were lucky. We had power at both sites. We've been actively in this for over probably 2.5 years, and I don't have either one of my sites completed yet. So as California pushed these mandates down, I think the utility companies were, I wouldn't say necessarily caught off guard, but they hadn't dealt with large commercial projects like this, so they didn't really have the internal pieces in place. So we've been kind of learning along with them, being an early adopter. So that's been one of the struggles. So we are very close to having our Rialto location energized, hopefully by the end of the year. And then we have not even broke ground at our Long Beach yard, and we're 2.5 years into this. So it has been an absolute battle with many delays across many different parts of the process.
So are the power companies, are they being a pretty good partner in this with you, realizing you have to work together to try to figure this out, or are you guys butting heads?
A little bit of both. I
Yeah.
think we're finally getting to more of the partner phase, and early on, I wouldn't necessarily call it button heads. I just think they were trying to get their internal processes together to support this push. And it's huge. I mean, we're one company with 60 or 70 trucks, and we need enough electricity to power 30,000 homes. Now let's compound that times
Right.
500 or 1,000 companies who are going to need that same thing. So it's like, where's all the power going to come from? How are they going to price the power? How are we going to handle these upgrades? How can we do it in the timeline that the state is driving? So I don't have anything bad to say specifically. We deal with SoCal Edison, and I would like to say they've been a good partner, but they've been facing some of the same obstacles we are from their internal processes.
Right. And they weren't ready for it either. So let's say you get to January 1 and there's some things not where it needs to be. I mean, what is the state of California going to do? Is there fines, or, do you see anything changing, I guess?
I don't know about any of that, if there's any of that type of structure laid out. Once again, we see this as an opportunity for us. We see it as an opportunity because our customers, they have their strategies going on and their initiatives around reducing emissions. So we're glad to kind of be a forerunner and partner with them to help them do that. But as far as it relates to, what's that going to look like when we're not meeting those objectives? I have my personal views on what it will look like. But I think overall, ultimately, we got to be able to move containers in and out of the ports of LA and Long Beach for the whole commerce piece to happen. I worry that sometimes we'll end up with not enough trucks to do that, just based upon some of the timelines they have in place. When all of a sudden a diesel vehicle falls off the registry to enter the port, it's like, we'll be glad to pick that up and there'll be other companies there. But I just sometimes worry that we're going to get into that cross section where there's not enough zero emission vehicles to handle all the volume that's coming in and out of the ports.
You're right. I see a bottleneck on the horizon, probably just by listening to what you're saying. Now, is electric the only zero emission vehicle option out there right now, or has anybody else got anything else that will qualify?
No, there's other things coming to market. Of course, you have the hydrogen battery electric vehicle that's coming, that's going to extend the range. I've driven the Kenworth hydrogen vehicle. I've driven the Nikola hydrogen vehicle. They're both options that are there, but the technology there is so new, and right now it's extremely expensive. A battery electric vehicle is 2.5 to 3 times what a day cab diesel would cost you, where a hydrogen vehicle is probably in the 4 to 5 times range right now as far as cost. And then there's the whole piece with hydrogen. Is it readily available for you to purchase? Which it is not. And then if it was, it's, $10 to $15 diesel equivalent for a gallon of hydrogen.
Holy smokes.
So it's very expensive.
So you mentioned the electric truck is 2 to 3 times the cost of the diesel. What's the life expectancy, or how do you ever get the payback or the return on that?
Well, needless to say, we probably don't make this big jump into the world of electric vehicles without a lot of help from the state of California.
Okay.
So we have funding called our HVIP program, where we get $150,000 per truck right off the top of the price of the truck.
Okay.
And then there's quite a bit of grant money available for us within the state of California. So ultimately, we end up, with a purchase price, it's very similar to what a diesel is after our rebates and grants. Otherwise, it's really hard. And I think that's a big struggle for a lot of the other companies right now that are in California that need to make this leap, that 5 to 10 to 15 or 20 unit fleet. It's like, how do we afford to make this transition to battery electric? And, And then you really we have a guy on the ground in California who manages the day to day with our relationships with the ports, the city of LA, the city of Long Beach, helps with all of our grants. And I don't know where I would be personally, or we would be as a company, without him on the ground managing this ever changing solution that's available in the state of California.
I can only imagine. It makes me think about, you mentioned earlier that the electrics don't need as much service as the diesels and stuff, but what about, where do you take it to get it worked on when it does break? Who's certified to do that? Is it the OEM? All their techs are certified, or is that still kind of in the works too?
You know, we've kind of seen that evolve right along with us throughout this process. You know, I think, you know, my personal opinion is Volvo, they've been doing the electric thing in Europe for quite a while. So I think maybe they've been a little bit ahead of everyone else. Kenworth has very quickly caught up with training their technicians on the battery electric side. So I think we've kind of chosen a couple OEMs that I think are getting to where they need to be to support this big push. It's all still relatively new. I mean, there hasn't been any big, massive 100, 200 unit rollouts in the state of California that I'm aware of for any carriers. So as this whole process has very quickly evolved over the last 2 years, you know, we've seen the support of the OEMs. I guess kind of the interesting, cool thing for me personally and for 4Gen is just being able to provide a lot of information about how we would like that maintenance piece to work. You know, I don't want to have to run all 40 of my Volvos across the Inland Empire 10 miles to get a basic service. You know, can we get my technicians trained to do that basic service under the warranty that Volvo is offering for their VNRs? And they've been very receptive to that, and having an electric mobile unit to come out for some of that stuff. So we're not always having to pull our trucks back into the dealership to get them serviced. And Kenworth is working with us very closely on that piece of it too, as they get more technicians trained and how exactly that will look. And it's going to be a requirement because fleets just can't afford to have that kind of downtime. So there's got to be some give and take there to help speed up that basic maintenance process.
What kind of items on the truck actually need service? Like you said, it's got a lot fewer moving parts than an internal combustion engine. So obviously you probably got some grease and some things you need to do that way. But what else, for us guys that are new to this electric thing, what else is there to service on them?
Really, you know, like you touched on, it's the basic grease points that a diesel would have as it relates to front end and rear end and air systems. The thing about battery trucks is they have 3 different kind of radiator systems on them, cooling systems on them. So that's a big kind of pre-trip check thing every day for the drivers, just to make sure that all those fluid levels are sound, because keeping those batteries cool is extremely important so you don't end up with any type of thermal events. So that's really going to be the biggest piece right there. There's not a lot of other things that we can maintenance. A lot of it is very computer driven. You know, we teach the drivers very early on, anything that is orange, do not touch, because that's all high voltage. So, and the good news is most of that stuff is not visible to the drivers anyway. But so that's really about it. I mean, there's not a lot. You're not, you know, checking your oil every day and doing those basic things you do in a pre-trip. It's really about fluid levels and just making sure some other things look like they're supposed to up under the hood. When you open the hood of an electric vehicle, if you haven't seen it and you were a layman that didn't really know, they set up that engine compartment to almost look like an engine, but it's really just a whole bunch of electronics related to you know, pushing the power where it needs to go for the truck.
That's crazy. Yeah, I wouldn't know what to expect either if it's you got an extra trunk there or what, but for sure. Is electric is it going to be the predominant long-term answer for zero emission, or do you think some of these other technologies are going to catch up to electric?
Yeah, I mean, I think electric is very specific in its use. I was on that call this morning and they talked about it being that short to medium duty or short to medium route solution. For me, I even struggle with, I think of medium maybe being more of that 400 to 500 mile range than maybe what some people look at it. But for our duty cycle, for our schedule, for our routes, it works really well for us, that under 225 miles a day. And we may still have to do some opportunity charging in there. I just can't picture until you can pull into a station and fuel in a very similar time to a diesel or a CNG truck, that electric is a long ways away from having that true longer medium to long haul type solution, because you just can't, a driver's not going to be hip on pulling in for a 2.5 hour recharge for his batteries. And that's what it is right now. It's 2.5 to 4 hours, depending on what type of high speed charging you're using. So I think we're a ways off from that being the case, from that medium to long haul type scenario. And I think ultimately hydrogen will make a big play into the market, which will extend that range. So what that's going to look like, I'm not sure. It's really early on. And of course, most of this stuff is being driven behind a day cab solution. They haven't even really tackled that whole sleeper long haul concept yet. And all I can tell you from the hydrogen is it's hard to find. It's not easy to transport. It takes a lot of electricity to make hydrogen. You really want a clean solution. That means we're not making hydrogen from coal burning power plants. So that's a big talk in the industry right now on what that's going to look like. But I think ultimately the long term would have to center around probably some form of hydrogen.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. The long haul applications and stuff. You think about what today's truck stop looks like, and what is that going to look like in the future? And does that mean there would have to be a charging station in every parking spot, essentially? Because you're not going to have a charging island that you can pull through and fuel within 15 minutes or charge within 15 minutes. So what does that have to look like? You said earlier that, as you guys are working through your local electric company, you don't have the power you need yet at your facilities. So how are you charging them now?
We were lucky that one of our yards in Long Beach allowed us to set up 6 kind of temporary 30 kilowatt chargers.
Okay.
And we've been using those. So right now we're running 3 BYDs, 7 Kenworths, and a Volvo. And we only run those on one shift. So we can split them up, and when a truck's not in use, it's being charged, and vice versa when the guys are just kind of switching out. So we're making that 6 charger system work for us until our main infrastructure is completed.
And in that current setup you have, then how long does that take to charge a vehicle? Are you still doing it in the 2.5 or 4 hour time frame?
Yeah, because once again, we're probably only using about 40 to 50% of battery life on the ones trucks we're using.
So you're not
40 or
not
50
draining
mile
them all
shift.
the way down.
Yeah. So it still takes a few hours at 30 kilowatts, but we have plenty of time to do that.
That is really interesting, because you think about maybe companies that do the local haul and some things similar to you, where they slip seat trucks. When you're thinking about a diesel truck, one guy's in it the first shift, and when he goes home, the second guy jumps in the same truck, and you keep that same truck going. But there's a different challenge there if there's a 4 hour charging window where you can't just keep slip seating probably.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the big things we had to look at. We knew going in this was never going to be a one-to-one situation. Once again, we're a 2-shift operation. We slip seat probably 70% of our diesels right now, day to night shift drivers. Coming in, we knew that wasn't going to be a possibility, so we kind of went about it with the mindset that we're going to need 3 trucks for every 2 drivers. Is kind of how we approached our electric initiative. And until we get all 60, 70 trucks going and running both shifts, it's really hard to know for sure if we were close to what we thought. We believe there will be some slip seating on some of our shorter days. We definitely know we have the ability to slip seat in our port operations because we're only using 40% battery charge and doing 40 or 50 mile routes each day for each shift. So we know we have the ability to do it there, but our Inland Empire operation is a little different. We're going to have guys that really use that whole battery cycle during their shift, and it will need that 2.5, 3.5 hours to charge. Can we do some schedule adjustments, start early in one end and late on the other end so we can do some slip seating? We think we can. But until we truly get into it and see the day-to-day and how that's going to work, we'll have to kind of wait and see how it plays out.
Yeah, this has been an incredible conversation. The probably one last question for you here before we wrap this segment up. How do you see this impacting the consumer? I mean, ultimately, as truck lines, are we going to have to raise rates because we're, being pushed towards this technology that's the cost of the equipment is quite a bit more. And at current levels, it's not quite as efficient, meaning how we use the equipment. So we have to have 3 trucks for 2 drivers, stuff like that. That's going to raise your cost to operate. So is the consumer going to ultimately end up paying for that through raised rates and things like that?
I can't speak for how this is going to work for everyone's model. For us, we don't have any plans to really raise our rates right now. We've kind of done the modeling based upon our diesel fleet and that 3-to-2 ratio with an electric fleet. And we see it working for us without any sort of big rate increase to our customers. So I can't say that's going to be the case for everyone else because it's probably not going to be the case. I mean, ultimately, anytime you put a new technology out there in the way that it's being done, that's 3 times the cost of traditional transportation. Ultimately, the consumer is some way, shape, or form going to pay a little bit in the end for the higher cost to move this transportation. I think the other thing that's kind of key for us is when you talk about the consumer is we're delivering to all these warehouses, and most people probably don't know in the state of California, they're under the same mandate to reduce emissions. So they're going to be fined if they're not doing certain things to reduce emissions. Luckily, one of the ways we can help them reduce that penalty that they have to pay is when they receive deliveries by electric trucks. So once again, another kind of advantage for those early adopters and for the rest of the state of California that will catch up is getting deliveries from someone in a zero emission vehicle helps offset what they call their wear credits in the warehousing world in the state of California. So I like to say we're adding a little bit of benefit to maybe the consumer at the end as we're helping out these warehouses and these companies that aren't going to have to pay these hefty penalties for not doing their part to reduce emissions in the state of California.
Yeah, and the warehouses are probably actively seeking the truck lines that are like yourself and being aggressive, and they want to work with you. You're going to become a preferred partner pretty fast if you weren't already,
Yes, we're already finding that. So we've got a lot of great customers that are excited about us being able to help them with that. And we have a lot of new customers knocking on our door saying, hey, what's your capacity to come help us out here?
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I can't thank you enough. I learned a ton. I'll probably have a gazillion more questions down the road, It opens up a lot of things. But, man, thanks for joining us today on this episode of Driven Too Far. I really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Take care. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Driven Too Far. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll see you on the next episode.